What is up, guys? Welcome back to After the Credits, the review show that no one asked for. Today, we're going to be talking about Pure. And this is actually a game that I had as a kid, and I fondly remember enjoying the game. But I also remember I didn't play it a whole lot. So even though I owned it, I hardly ever put it in my PS3, and I always found that kind of interesting. But I got to tell you, after replaying the game here in 2025, I can clearly remember why I put this game down as a kid. And we will talk about all of that and more in this episode of After the Credits. So thank you guys so much for joining me again. But without further ado, let's dive into Pure. So Pure is an ATV off-road trick-based arcade racing game developed by BlackRock Studios, who's more known for creating the ATV Off-Road Fury games on the PS2, and they would later go on to develop Split Second a couple of years after Pure, which is another game I hope to revisit soon in the future. But the interesting thing was this game was actually published by Disney Interactive Studios. They actually went through a period of time where they were publishing video games, and this is one of the games they chose to pick up and publish. They don't do that anymore, but still pretty unique that this was published by Disney. It always seems a little weird playing this game and seeing Disney Interactive on the side. I don't know. Thought that was pretty unique. But anyways, this game is structured in 10 different chapters in the world tour that you have to play through, and those chapters are all composed of 3 different race styles, essentially, or categories, so to speak. The first category is a race category, which is pretty self-explanatory. You have to take first place in order to win. The next event series is the sprint series, which is just a much condensed version of the race series. And the final category is a freestyle category, which is essentially just a trick-based mode where the person who has the most points at the end of the time limit is the winner. And that's the 3 events that you're going to be playing through while going through the World Tour. Now, what sets Pure apart from other arcade racing games is the fact that you really have to manage your boost in this game in a very different way than I've seen in a lot of other racing games. So, to break it down further, what you do in the game is you do tricks. It is a trick-based racing game, as I said before. And the amount of tricks that you do builds up your boost bar. That's pretty common. But this boost meter is actually separated into 3 different segments. So at the very beginning of the race, you're able to use cross or X or whatever system you're using. I'm going to use PlayStation controls, but you're able to do cross tricks. And essentially how you perform a trick is you jump off of a ramp, you hold X, and you push the left thumbstick in any direction, and that will initiate a trick. When the race begins at the very beginning, you only have cross abilities available to use. As you continue to do tricks, your boost meter will fill up, and then once you hit that 1/3 threshold, it unlocks circle tricks. Now, with each individual segment of the trick meter, the tricks that you are able to do require a little bit more setup time and a little bit more time for your character to regain control of the ATV, so they all become riskier and riskier as you progress through. So the circle tricks are very similar to the cross tricks. They just take a little longer, but they also do give you more boost for successfully completing those tricks. And then once you get 2/3 of the bar full, you unlock triangle tricks. These, again, just take longer to develop, are harder to land, but if you do land them, you're rewarded with a much larger amount of boost or points if you're playing in the freestyle mode. And then the final bar, once the bar fills up completely, unlocks the ability to perform a special trick. And to perform these, you just have to make sure you're holding boost while going off a ramp, and then you hit the left and right bumper, which will trigger the special move. And these typically will actually give you a whole refill of your boost bar. So where this gets a little complicated and what sets this game apart from other racing games is you're constantly balancing when to use boost, but you don't want to use so much boost that you fall out of one of the more advanced trick categories, because you want to be able to build boost as fast as you can. And if you go, from the 2/3 threshold back to the 1/3 threshold, you lose the ability to do circle tricks, which is inefficient because you're unable to get boost in a big quantity like you would be if you were performing the more difficult tricks. So it's a constant balance. It's kind of stressful. and very, very, very hard starting at about chapter 6. So this game gets brutally difficult, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. So that's pretty much the structure of your standard race event. Is just a constant balancing act of your boost meter with the trick meter to make sure you're kind of in the best position possible throughout the entire event. Sprint races, on the other hand, are much more focused on just your pure skill and ability to be able to control the ATV. These ended up being my favorite events in the game, and typically how they're laid out is you might have one ramp in the entire sprint circuit that you can do one trick off of, so you gain a very small amount of boost. So boost is almost taken completely out of these races. It's more or less just about your technical skill and being able to perform and control the ATV on these tighter circuits. And like I said, this is a much more skill-focused event that I tended to enjoy the most out of all 3 of the events. And then the last category is the freestyle events. And like I said, during these freestyle events, it's the same tracks as what you would play on the race events. However, there's a lot of icons that are scattered throughout the level that you can pick up to get double points and things of that nature. But this is all focused on doing as many tricks as possible and as many advanced complex tricks as possible in order to continue to work up your points while also working up your trick combo meter. That is just a multiplier that keeps adding on and adding on. But yeah, this is just your standard trick score attack mode, and it's pretty straightforward. What's very interesting about this game is, now we'll go into the difficulty a little bit. At the very beginning, I would say for the first 5 chapters, what you're going to notice is that the race events are much more difficult than the freestyle events. And this is simply because of the fact that your ATV, as you progress through the chapters, will get faster and faster, being able to put in different tiers of engines in your ATVs. So you start at D class, which is a pretty slow ATV, so you have to really prioritize your boost more efficiently than you would in the latter half of the game, because in the latter half of the game, you're in a very fast ATV where boost is less essential to being able to perform a good race. So the race events at the beginning are very, very difficult. And then towards the end, that completely shifts to where the freestyle events that were easy in the first 5 chapters become much more difficult in the later chapters, because with a much more powerful ATV, you also have a chance of just completely eating yourself off of these maps. So it's a very interesting dynamic, and it's cool that it really shifts in that manner. But that being said, I think that chapters 6 through 10 are way too difficult for this game. There's no difficulty settings, and those chapters are going to absolutely whoop your ass. Now, to backtrack just a second before we go into the difficulty concerns that I have with this game, there is a cool ability to be able to actually create your own ATVs as you go through the game. This is really, really neat. You can add different parts to your ATV, you can add different plastics, you can add decals, and you can really customize your ATV in a bunch of different ways to a bunch of different colors. And it's a really cool mechanic for a game this age to be able to actually do that. However, what I tended to do, I wasn't really too interested in making a cool ATV, because I knew as soon as I tiered up, I'd be moving on from that ATV. But the developers actually put in a cool feature where when you go to start a new ATV build, you can actually just spam the cross or the square button to build a race spec ATV, or you can spam the triangle button to build a freestyle spec ATV. So what I traditionally went and did was, when I started, let's say I went from D to C tier, I would delete my D tier ATVs, and then I would do a quick build of a C tier race ATV and a C tier freestyle ATV, and then I would go through the C tier and repeat the process for B and A tier. So I didn't actually spend any time doing it, but it is still cool. I think customization in games is a wonderful thing, but I didn't spend a lot of time with it per se. But it's cool to note anyways. This game also does have a pretty cool soundtrack. It's your standard, like, affair kind of rock poppy soundtrack that you would expect from an arcade racing game. Don't think it's the best soundtrack, to be fair, but I think it's serviceable for what it is. I don't know, there's not really much else to say about the music. It's decent. Okay, so let's dive into the difficulty issue. Okay, so what you're gonna notice is chapters 1 through 4, easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. No issues, really not a big deal, not that difficult to complete any of those events and take first place. Chapter 5, it starts to get a little iffy. Chapter 6 is where the game flips on its head. So for me, I'm a pretty experienced racing game player. I play a lot of racing games. I tend to very much enjoy racing games, but I will say in the race events, starting in chapter 6 through chapter 10, the CPU ran the same exact pace laps that I did in every event. So it essentially became a rush for me to get in the lead, like, as quickly as humanly possible, whether that be the CPU kind of fucking all around and me just sneaking ahead, or they take a jump and crash and I take the lead. But I essentially needed to get into the lead within the first 15 seconds or so for me to even have a chance to win, because if I fell behind at any point in time, I was going to run the same exact lap times as the CPU, and I would never catch up unless they made a mistake. Don't think that's the greatest structure, to be honest. Typically what you see in an arcade racing game like this is you see rubber banding AI. So if you get way ahead of the CPU, you'll notice all of a sudden they get kind of flung forward to keep the race competitive. Doesn't occur in this game, so if you're able to get in the lead and hold the lead, you can usually stay there. But it does create a little bit of an interesting thing, because it's almost a priority to make sure that you get into the front as soon as possible. And the same thing applies to the freestyle events, unfortunately. Usually if you can rack up a really big combo at the very beginning of the freestyle event, so typically, you know, what you're looking for is like anywhere from 60 to 100,000 on your first trick combo. That'll usually cement you into a victory, but it's a lot more difficult than that. I mean, this game really becomes a reset simulator starting in chapter 6. There's just a lot of resetting and a lot of being like, oh, well, I could race this out all the way through the 3 laps, but I'm probably not going to catch him, so it's just more time efficient if I just start over. And you end up doing that, I think, way too much. I think the difficulty, I think there should at least be difficulty options in the game. Well, that would help a lot, but you know, I don't know why that's not here. It's very interesting. I've read some things online about if you really suck butt cheeks in the tutorial, it'll actually put the game's difficulty down to match your skill. So maybe that's just their thought process, is they'll make it competitive by making the CPU identical to you, but that was literally how it was for me. I thought it was weird, but it created a little bit of a weird dynamic for those last few chapters, because, like I said, I saw more of loading times from resets than I did the actual game. Now, again, with the older game, I always like to talk about playability in the modern era, because, well, obviously, it's not a modern game, it's an older game, so it's going to be a little bit more. There's some questions that people may have before deciding they want to go back and check out a game like this. As far as I'm concerned, I think the game looks acceptable. Doesn't look phenomenal anymore, clearly, based on what you can see behind me, but it's serviceable. It looks good. I didn't really have any massive complaints about the presentation. I think it's okay for the most part. I think that the bikes, the ATVs, they call them quad bikes, so I end up calling these things bikes all the time, and they're not bikes. Who cares? Anyways, I think the gameplay feels very good, though. So the game feel holds up very well today. The presentation, a little bit more on the mid side, but nothing that's going to really cause any problems, I don't think. It's not a hard game to adjust to by any means. Now, it took me about 10 hours to complete Pure, so not necessarily a super short game, all things considered. I think if, again, there's difficulty options, I would have been able to fly through this game much quicker, but in the end, it took me about 10 hours, and I will tell you, no platinum again. This game has online trophies, and I believe the online does still work, but who the fuck is playing Pure in 2025? Me. That's it. Just me. So, unobtainable platinum, for the most part, unless you guys in the comments down below have PlayStation 3s and want to play Pure with me, let me know. We can fucking grind out the Platty together. But other than that, no platinum. Got the majority of the trophies though anyways, and they were just very straightforward. Just play through the chapters and you'll unlock the majority of them. Alright, so that's going to do it for Pure. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Overall, I think this game's pretty decent. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's mid. I think it's a little bit above mid. It's alright. I mean, if you like the gameplay footage that you've seen from this video, I would recommend maybe checking it out. Just be prepared that it is a difficult game. It's a lot more brain taxing than it looks at face value, but I think it's pretty good. I would say if you like arcade racing games and are up for a challenge, give it a shot. I was able to get the game for $5. It's actually a weird situation. I got this game loose. I got the loose cart. They only had the disc. So I actually printed off a label. So this is a reprint, as you can tell by the spine that just says PlayStation 3 on it. But I got it loose for $5. I don't know what it goes for CIB. Probably not much more. Probably like $7. I don't know. I don't think this game sold entirely bad, so I don't know. I think they're out there. But all in all, not terrible. And check it out if you're interested in arcade racers. But yeah, that's it. Love y'all. Thank you guys so much for watching this one again. No clue what's next. I think I'm going to go back to the PS5 for the next after the credits game. Give the PS3 a break. We did Dante's Inferno and now Pure. So time to get in some more modern games. So be prepared for a PS5 episode next. But other than that, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Love you all. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you guys soon. See ya.